Thank you all for packing on One Room School to come to the Hay Lake presentation today. Just the first few notes of business. There's kind of a couple cool things with the Washington County Historical Society coming up on Tuesday night. It's Townie Tuesday at Liftbridge Brewing. $1 from every beer that's sold goes to the restoration of the Boutwell House that we have purchased and we're in the process of restoring, that I'm sure a lot of you people know of. There's one more presentation here at the end of next month, September 27th. It will be on photography, so if you know anybody about photography, a group came in and took some really nice pictures of the school. They're going to show you how they did it and the equipment they use. So I know a lot of people are pretty into that. There's also going to be a Living Cemetery event here in Scandia, Minnesota on October 11th. We have newsletters over there with the schedules of kind of the events that are rounding out the end of the year. Please feel free to take one. We have some other great stuff at the Warden's House Museum too, one on professional wrestling, and I'm not sure what the other, does he have anything else?
I think
paranormal investigation.
Yes.
I was just going to say, we still do, you have 2 weeks left. The Warden's House Museum is haunted. There is a raffle for $10 a ticket to get a chance to actually spend the night on the Warden's House with the paranormal group and actually see what it's like. I actually went with them last night to the Wilson Place Mansion in Menominee. I was there from 8 till 3:30 in the morning, so I'm full of energy because I'm super tired. But it is pretty interesting if you know anybody who they think that'd be cool to win this chance. 2 people get to go with them throughout the house. And then they give a presentation on it at the end of October. It's very interesting to go to. They have caught some pretty creepy things there. They let you make your own guess if you believe it's a ghost or not. They do not say it because they're very good. So, but with all that being said, any questions after the presentation that I can answer involving any of that? But I'll turn it over to Susan and we'll get this show on the road. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dustin.
Yes.
I did a talk at the Reed School in Neillsville, Wisconsin last Saturday, and it was so hot. And I was standing in a one-room school like this, and I was thinking that it must have been incredibly hot for the kids and the teacher. So I was wishing in my head, I can't wait for it to be cold. So if you can blame the weather on me, because it definitely feels like back to school weather, right? Yeah. So I was sort of looking, there's 4 kids here that are young enough to be school age, right? I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4. So I might ask you to help me out in the presentation if that's okay. Is that okay? All right. So my name is Susan Apps Bodilli, and I'm really excited to be here today. I met Dustin last November in Menominee, and we had a really nice time there. And so we were sort of emailing back and forth, and he invited me to come up here because he said, you're really going to like this school. And he was right, because this is a really nice one-room school. It has lots of extra things that most one-room schools didn't have. So this will be really fun to talk about. Plus, I'm actually from Wisconsin. I live in Madison. So you know more about Minnesota history than I do. So I will be asking for your help. And I know there's 2 alumni here today with us from the Hay Lake School. That is so exciting. Arbutus, can you just raise your hand in the back? She's practicing being in school again. And her, we found, and 3 then. There are 3. You're an alumni too? So 4 and 5? Wow.
People keeping a secret.
I know. That is so cool. So Arbutus was here early and we found her picture on the wall over here. And then she said she went to school here too, right?
Yep. She's asking if she went to school.
Yeah. So that's just really exciting and really fun for me to talk to you when you actually went to school here. So if anyone has any ideas or stories to share at the very end, we'll leave time for that because that is really fun to share stories. So is there anyone else that went to a one-room school here or anywhere? Yeah, good. So you are definitely my experts because I'm not a one-room school graduate, but I'm really interested in schools because I'm currently a 2nd grade teacher in Madison, Wisconsin. And I'm here with my husband, who's a teacher in Wisconsin Heights. And so he comes and is my tech support because I really need that. And I'm really happy here because my stepdaughter's here in the back with her, and my grandbaby Tyler's here, and my son Josh, and Shauna's husband Pat. So it's really fun that we came up to Minnetonka on Friday, and then we were able to come over here today. So I was really excited to be invited to come and talk with you today. So this is my book, One Room Schools, Stories from the Days of One Room, One Teacher, 8 Grades. And even though it says stories, it's nonfiction. It's true information about one-room schools in Wisconsin. And my dad is Jerry Apps. Has anybody heard of Jerry Apps from public TV or from his writing? Yeah, so he also did a book about one-room schools that I was showing somebody earlier today. This is his book. So he did a book about one-room schools for adults that is actually out of print now. But if you're interested in learning more about one-room schools from his book, the Wisconsin Historical Society Press has decided to go ahead and reprint his book pretty much just the way it is because of the Amish community in Wisconsin. They were interested in getting more copies of it, and the publisher has since is not around anymore, and so the Historical Society was kind enough to agree to just reprint the whole book. So this book will be available within a year too. But I started with a lot of his research and used a lot of his information. And then they asked me if I would do a book for young readers. In Wisconsin, the 4th graders study Wisconsin history. So the book is sort of aimed at 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. But it's been really exciting for me because lots and lots of adults are buying this book, either because they have memories of one-room schools or because they want to share it with their families. And it's a way to start bringing up memories in families and start talking about the past. So, that's my little welcome slide. Has anybody ever been to Old World, Wisconsin, outside of Milwaukee? Really, if you can get there, it's just phenomenally wonderful. Really nice place. And this is the welcome sign above the door at the Raspberry School, and they remade it the way that it originally was. Those are little wallpaper samples that they glued on the letters to say welcome above the school. You might be wondering why a city girl's interested in one-room schools. This is my elementary school in Madison. It's obviously not a one-room school. But my family, this is Josh actually in this slide. So this is a school in central Wisconsin, sort of south of Stevens Point. And my family has a cabin that's about down the road on this side of the school. And my grandpa's farm was on the other side of the school. So when I was at the cabin with my family, we'd drive past this school to go to my grandparents' house. So ever since I was 6 years old, we'd drive back and forth past this school. And it had long since closed and was owned by a family. And at this point, it was actually for sale. So Josh and I sort of walked around and peeked in the windows and got some pictures of it. But I always wondered what it would be like to go to school in a one-room school with all the 8 grades in one room. And then I was offered the chance to start writing about it, and it got really exciting because then it started answering my questions about what it was like. And when I was writing, I kept this picture taped to my desk because it was really important for me to include stories from real people, and I wanted to approach the study of history as stories and not just facts and information. So this is a picture, this one's my dad, and these are my 2 uncles in the front. And I wanted the voices of the kids from the school to really be front and center in my thinking when I was writing. So I kept that picture sort of taped to my desk. So part of the reason I wrote the book is because it's part of my family history. My dad went to that one-room school, and then this is my mom at her farm near Westby, and I feel right at home in this Swedish area because my mom, my grandma Ella was 100% Swedish, and she grew up in Gibbons near Mankato, Minnesota. And then she moved to Westby and married a 100% Norwegian man. And that was not good, apparently. She was really, really out of place in that Norwegian community. You know what I mean, right? But my grandma Ella knew a lot of Swedish, and we have a lot of Swedish culture in my family. But this is my mom's home farm near Westby, and my grandma Ella saved so many neat things of my mom's that have since passed down to me. So this is one of my mom's scrapbooks, and my grandma numbered all the people and all the pictures, and then put the name of who they were. So my mom is number 12 in the back there. This is her picture from a scrapbook of her one-room school. So I grew up listening to stories from my dad and my mom, and that was sort of part of my life. And then when you're doing historical research, it's good, besides your stories that you hear from your family, you have to turn to other people's stories. So I went to the Rhinelander Pioneer Park Historical Complex and just walked in to their one-room school museum, and I met the lady in the next slide, and her name is Lily. And she happened to be volunteering in the schoolhouse that day, and she was a teacher in a school not far from Rhinelander. And I said, can you tell me some things about life being a teacher? And then 3 hours later, she was still talking. And she remembered all sorts of vivid memories, and not just facts, but the smell of the wood floor in the fall after they oil it when it's getting ready for the school year. And she remembered the soup. And when she was teaching in the winter, she let the kids make a whole school pot of soup when they were all brought in something to add to the chicken soup. And she said that all morning the snow was falling and you could smell the soup in the classroom while you were working, and the kids just couldn't wait till lunchtime. So she had real vivid memories that included more than just facts. She remembered smells and sights and student names and stories that I included in my book. And I kept in touch with her, and she gave me a picture of herself that I included in my book. And I really enjoyed talking with her and learning more from a person that actually taught there. So I am really a big fan of local historical societies, and I feel like they need support. And every time I travel around to historical societies, I give a plug to the local historical society. This one is a half of a map that the Oregon Historical Society has put together, just sort of marking where all of their one-room schools used to be. And it's a good way to show kids, when I do talks for kids, where the one-room schools were and about how far apart they were, and how they were, no kid really had to walk more than 2 miles. It's also good to show that the one-room school was pretty much the center of that community, and that the families all around that school identified where they lived by the name of the school. So if you went to the Hay Lake School and someone asked you, where did you live? You said, I'm in the Hay Lake School community, because it was such a center for the community. Here's another one that the Buffalo County school area did, and they just collected pictures of the one-room schools in their area, and then they've got a little pin map to show where they all were. This is where I was last Saturday, where it was so hot. Obviously, you can get real good information from museums, and this is the Reed School in Neelsville. And secondary sources, of course, are information that other people have written about a topic. So I read everything I could find that was currently available about one-room schools. In the basement of the Neelsville school, they have it's kind of funny because the upstairs is like this. It's like a school. And then when you go to their basement, they have all sorts of signage all around the walls with information about the history of one-room schools. And they have touchscreen computers where you can try an 8th grade examination. And there's another computer where you can click on people's names, and then you can listen to oral histories of their memories. So it's really neat to go in the basement there and find out information about schools. In Wisconsin, it was part of our Constitution that a free public education was available for kids age 4 to 21. And so this is important information about how public school was supported right from the beginning in Wisconsin. So another source of information is a primary source, where you're getting real documents or real things that were there. So I was lucky to find, this is not complete, but I got this at an antique shop. And as a teacher myself, it's really fun to see a planner or teacher's comments from a one-room school. So this is a scanned picture from this book. And the teacher had to keep track of the condition of the school, and she had to do a report at the end of the period. So that's just an example of a really great source of primary information. here's my dad's report card from first grade, and it's just some more information about what a primary source is. So he was promoted to second grade, he passed reading and got A's, and he's got grades in art, language, spelling, phonics, and how many times tardy and how many times absent. And it's interesting, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, it's interesting to me when I was looking at that as a first grader, he was really graded for what we still think is important in first grade. You know, reading and phonics and language arts. And then he didn't necessarily get letter grades for everything, but they were still really learning to read in first grade. I was really lucky to have the treasurer's report from the Cheney Lake School from the time it started till the time it closed. And the treasurer's report is just is a line item, you know, date and the person and what it was for what they spent money on. And I just happened to, I put this page in my talk. It was 1939 when my dad was in first grade. And you can see that the teacher, Miss Piowski, her first month's salary was $85. But then they went ahead and gave her a little bit of her next month's salary. I assume because she needed the money to start the school year. And then it's kind of interesting because someone came in and was paid $5 to clean the school and get it ready and polish up the floors. But something must have happened that her husband got hurt because he was paid $4 for broken bones. So I don't know if something happened in the yard or somehow he got hurt and they put a line item in the budget for $4 for broken bones. So that's a really fun primary source of information. So you really know what happened based on how they spent their money. And there's lots of different one-room schools. This is a beautiful example of a brick one-room school. And here's another brick one-room school near Waukesha. Most of them were wood and white, and they were generally facing the same sort of size, the same sort of direction, and they sort of planned where to put the windows so you would have the best light. And I like that one because it's just a dirt road and all the kids sitting on the fence. Here's the inside of a schoolroom in Grant County. And this picture I've used to show kids kind of these desks. If we're not, it's nice to do a talk in a school because you can see what it's like. But usually if I'm in an other sort of building, it's nice to have a picture like this so kids can have an idea of what the desks were like. Here's another picture of the inside of a schoolroom with the piano and the teacher desk and the smaller desks in the front like this and larger desks in the back. Here's that same Cheney Lake School then. And when we're talking about doing research, I tell my class they have to start thinking like a historian. So this is the Cheney Lake School again, and there's a red building there. And I have this picture in my book, and I showed it to my class when the book came out. And I said, what do you think that red building was for, if you're starting to think like a historian? So now I'm going to pick on the kids, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think that red building was for? Yeah, to keep things. Do you know what kinds of things might have been in the red building? Does anybody else want to take a guess what the red building was for? It wasn't an outhouse. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a woodshed. So you were on the right track. For this school, that was the woodshed and also the place where they kept the long boards that they used for. They didn't have a nice stage like this. This is gorgeous. They had to have long boards that they put on sawhorses for the Christmas program. So that's where they stored those, and they stored rakes and shovels and things to clean up the yard in there. And I asked my class, and I teach city kids, so I asked them what they thought the red building was for, and they said they thought it was for bikes, recess equipment, and someone said the teacher lived there, and I said no, that usually the teacher lived with the students. Sometimes they lived with the students and traveled from house to house, or sometimes they boarded in the same house for the whole year. And of course, kids are just bewildered by the fact that your teacher might live with you. Would you like that? Your teacher lived with you. So if you had a house for a wood stove, then you needed a way to heat your place. So this is a wood stove at the Old World, Wisconsin. And I was talking to Dustin about this one, and he said that that's really not the stove that was here, right? That's really much larger than the one that would have been here.
Photo of this.
Yeah.
Similar. But it's a little larger, yeah.
So in this school, the wood stove might have been in that place, but then the pipe could have gone over here, and there's the hole that the wood stove would have gone up. But most schools did have a wood stove, and it was the student's job to bring in wood from the woodshed or to collect kindling to get the wood fire started in the winter. And then if there was no heat, then there's no indoor plumbing either. So, of course, you had outhouses in the back, and one for the girls and one for the boys. And usually in the winter, an older student had to shovel paths to the outhouses to make sure it was clear. And I just did a talk earlier this summer, and this is a picture of the 2-seater outhouse at Old World, Wisconsin. And sometimes kids I had a little girl in the front like you are, and she just covered her eyes when she saw that outhouse picture because she just couldn't stand the thought of going to the bathroom in an outhouse. And then another lady told me a story in the winter. She went to the outhouse in school. And she had brand new grandma knit mittens on. And she went to the outhouse, and wouldn't you know, one of them fell in the hole. So she still remembered this really, really vividly. She went back to school into the room, and she thought she was going to get in trouble from the teacher. Well, she said the teacher didn't get mad because she figured that mom would be mad enough. So the little girl couldn't remember, couldn't work the whole rest of the day, was so nervous to go home. And then she said luckily her mom just laughed and thought it was sort of funny. And she didn't get mad and said Grandma would knit another one. But when I asked her most vivid memory, it was regarding the outhouse and it was down the hole. So here's a picture of a pump, and that would be where you got your water, of course. And this school has a beautiful water cooler in the back. So, yep, Dustin's pointing to it back there. So some schools had a pump either on the grounds to bring water into a water cooler, or if there wasn't a pump on the schoolyard, then maybe a neighbor brought water over, so there was always water to drink and to wash up. Here's the one at the Raspberry School where they just show kids how they washed up right in there. Here's another nice water cooler at Neilsville, really similar to that one on the back. Teachers did have to go to at least 2 years of normal school, and in Wisconsin, the first normal schools were in Platteville and Whitewater, and those ended up being teacher colleges then after that. So they did have a little bit of training, but they were usually pretty young and not too much older than the kids at the school. Go ahead and keep going, Paul. Here's a bell. Do you guys have a rope in the back to pull your bell? So this is oh, he's gonna pull the bell. Nice. There it is. Isn't that a great sound? So if you were on your way to school and you heard the bell, you knew you had to hustle up because you were gonna be late if you heard the bell ringing. This is a teacher, and this is actually at Dunn County. And Ethel was given an award that day for being the volunteer of the year for doing all the school visits with kids in the spring. So she took us over to their museum, and she was just really happy to ring the bell for us. Here's a cloak. So your cloakroom's back that way in the side, a real nice room with hooks. This one's at Rhinelander. And they actually, it wouldn't have had that many posters or things in it, but that's showing you the length of the hallway where they would put the coats. The school day started with some sort of flag ceremony or a patriotic song. And we still do the Pledge of Allegiance today at school, and that's what they did. And that's just another great teacher desk picture here. So the school teacher had to be very, very organized with the schedule. And I've asked teachers, how did you possibly fit in all those classes for 8 grades? And Lily said you just really had to be organized, and you had to watch the clock, and the kids just knew when it was their turn. And this nice schedule posted over here, an example of what a day might have been like. This is actually the program that's in this one, so I just photocopied that up. So maybe each reading class would come up for 15 minutes, and they'd have a table or a circle of chairs in the front. So whoever was in that group would come up for their lesson. And then the benefit of a one-room school, and you folks that went to one-room schools can add to this, lots and lots of people had told me the benefit of that type of schedule in a one-room school is that while your group is meeting, say 3rd grade reading, everybody else is listening in to that lesson while you're working. So if you were in 1st grade or 2nd grade, you're sort of listening up, you're learning up. And then if you're listening to 4th or 5th grade, geography or civics or agriculture, and you're still in 1st grade, you get to hear that lesson all these years ahead of time, and then every year until you're in that grade. And if you're older, you're sort of listening back. So if you didn't quite understand something, you're relearning it. So it's just a real natural, multi-age way to learn. And I feel like that was just a real big benefit to the one-room school, that it was just a real natural integration of curriculum. That not just because you had 4th grade reading at 9:55, everybody who's under 4th grade was still sort of learning with them. Here's the afternoon schedule from this book with agriculture and another session of reading for each grade. There were two recesses. There's another schedule. I'm a teacher, so I like the schedule part. That was like one of my biggest questions. How did you fit everything in? And once you see it laid out, it does make a lot of sense. And there was still time for a recess in the morning, and a recess in the afternoon, and an hour at lunch. So it fits in. What a beautiful library. Our beautist told me that whole back area back there was their library, right? And most schools were lucky if they had sort of a nice bookshelf in the back of the room where they stored all the books, sort of like this one. This was also at Buffalo County. I like this idea where for this reading group, each student got a flower, and as they read books, they got to paint the flower on the flower pot. So that was a nice way to keep track of reading. We still teach word families in 2nd grade, and this is a poster of word families at the Rhinelander School Museum. I did a talk at the Monona Public Library for their history club, and a lady came to that meeting and had one of these belts to tie around your books. Did anybody have anything like that to carry books? There were some kids there, and they just thought that was the funniest thing, to have a belt for books. Because most kids today have, a string bag or backpack, and there weren't any, backpacks to your one-room school, so that was just an example of books around some belts. Here's a reading award for Jerry Apps's 1st grade year. And I still give out awards to kids for their reading. Spelling. Does anybody like spelling in elementary school? Did you? Lily said they had a spelling bee almost every week. And I think the next picture, here's the spell down, or a spelling bee, where you would have everybody included, and then the teacher would just give you your own spelling words, so that not everybody was spelling the same words, but you were sort of spelling against kids in your own grade. In Mount Horeb, they have actually a 2-story one-room school that they fixed up. And in the winter in Mount Horeb, they have a Scandinavian festival, and everybody in town wears, red troll hats. So I went there on a Sunday afternoon. They were doing an adult spelling bee. It was all the adults, you had to pay to be in the spelling bee, and all the adults got to have a number. It's actually kind of a good idea, because it was definitely full of people, all the families, and they were, just selling coffee and cookies to make money for their museum. And they had the 2 folks that were judges were retired high school teachers, and they took it pretty seriously, because they used the actual middle school spelling words that the country uses. And I was really glad I didn't do it, because it got really hard pretty fast, and I love to spell. And this is the gal that had won the previous year, the one dressed up like a bee. So she came back dressed up like a bee, I think expecting to win again. This gal actually won right here. And she was good. They gave her the word, she spelled it, and she sat down. I was impressed. It was a lot of fun. You've got awesome collection of old maps over here. I love old maps. It's really fun to look at them, obviously the world has changed. It's fun to look at old maps. Lunchtime. Here's my dad and his brothers, and I'm pretty sure it was close to a first day of school picture. And it was fun for me to find this picture, because I recognized my grandma's silhouette on the left there. I know that's her. I brought a lunch pail to a talk like this, and asked people to guess what it was. And actually a teacher that I work with thought it was a paint can. So I said, no, this was something that maybe an old lard bucket, or people have said honey, or Karo syrup. But this is maybe something you would bring your lunch in, and a sandwich with wax paper, and an apple, or a cookie. And it was plenty big enough to bring a nice lunch. And if it was nice, the kids could eat. Did you eat outside here at this school? They probably did. Because they ate outside. In the winter, they would just stay in and eat at their desks. Go ahead, Paul. Here's another picture of kids with lunch pails that we put in my book for the lunch pail picture, but also because in Grant County there was actually an integrated school that was naturally integrated because some free slaves had moved to the area and started farming. So it was one of the earliest integrated schools in Wisconsin. These are more pictures of lunch buckets in a museum. And it's kind of fun to talk to kids about and try to have them guess sort of the history of lunch buckets and which are the oldest and which are the newest based on how they look. Recess. I think kids really liked recess at one-room schools as much as today. And in my book, I have a chapter in the back with recess games and things to play. And I know you've got some really awesome buttons up here all strung up. And I think these are the kind that you go like this and they spin, right? But there's still the game, the button, who's got the button game that you can play inside on and I played that with my class. And then when you have a building like this, you can go outside and play anti-over or anti-eye over, what people call it different things, and you throw the ball over the top, right? You're shaking your head, you must have played this. This school is in Grant County. Oh, go back, Paul. Because this is a picture from the Wisconsin Historical Society images, and we found that to put in the book. And then I was looking at it, and I recognized the building because this is how it looks today. And I was driving, and I pulled over to take a picture. It's a private home now, but I recognized it as the school from the recess picture. So that was kind of fun to see it the way it was as a school, and then to recognize it as it is today as a home. Lots of the 8th graders and 7th graders were in charge of recess games and in charge of keeping track of organizing for all the little kids. And some people have said the teacher came out to play, and some people say the teacher never came out to play. So probably depended on whether the teacher wanted to join the kids or not. This picture I've told kids that, and told people to make sure they know we don't play with ropes at recess anymore. That it looks like they're having a lot of fun with lassos. The Christmas program. Lily said the Christmas program was the most important event of the winter. And she even said if you didn't put on a good Christmas program, the school board would think about firing you. It was that important to the community. And she said that the day after Thanksgiving, at the end of the day, she had in her mind that she was going to start practicing and having the kids get ready to say their piece at the Christmas program. And some of the kids would start making paper chains or decorations, and the older kids would start practicing their skit or a play or songs. And it was so important to the community because everybody came, not just the people with kids. I think, isn't there one more Christmas picture? No? Okay. All right, and this, of course, they have Valentine's Day and Halloween celebrations. My mom still had this card that she made for her dad. It was in another scrapbook. It was just a piece of construction paper with a little tissue tied on there. So we put that in the book too. In the spring, lots of schools had sort of an extra fun day where they got the rakes and raked the whole yard and cleaned up. And this one's from Dunn County actually. And my Aunt Marilyn says they did the same thing as these kids, that once the yard was all cleaned out, they got to have hot dogs or marshmallows and build a fire. So I can imagine if you were inside a one-room school all winter, that the day you got to open the windows and go outside and clean up must have been a really fun day. At the end, here's another party from the Chain Lake School. And this one I didn't have the exact date, but this picture actually has an electric light at the top. And I know from the treasurer's book that the Chain Lake School got electricity in 1944 because it says it in the book. So I know this picture's later than 1944. School of the Year. I'm not sure how it was in Minnesota, but in Wisconsin, the University Extension had a program where they put radio programs for kids and some for families over the radio waves. So the one-room schools in Wisconsin had battery-operated radios, and the teacher could buy a teacher guide, and you could listen to shows about art or drawing or nature over the radio. So some people have said that in the one-room schools there weren't, like the specials classes we have today, but they did have programs over the radio, and there was art and music in the one-room schools too. This is is the show that lots of people in Wisconsin remember called Let's Sing. And Pop Gordon was the professor from Wisconsin that did that show on the radio. And here's Ranger Mac, who did sort of a nature show, and he encouraged people to have a sort of a nature table in the room or a school forest area in the yard. At the end of the year, there's usually a big picnic to celebrate the end of the year and a big softball game. And my dad says it was really the only time that the dads, his dad and the neighbors came and played at the school because they were just too busy otherwise. So it was a pretty big party at the end of the year. Here's a neat grade book at the end of the year to show. And lots of times I've talked to kids about why there's so many of the same last names. And obviously it's because you were in school with your brothers and sisters. So lots of school registers have lots of the same families. I just talked to a man last Saturday, and he said he was from a family of 12, and then another family had 14, and then another family had 15. So I said, you pretty much were the school, just in those same three families. And he said, yeah, we pretty much were. That just those three families in that one area were all in the same school together. This is a teacher's report from 1913, and I think that Mabel must have been leaving the school because in this book, there are longer reports for teachers that seem like they're leaving. She says the children are all doing good work. Numbers 1 and 11 are promoted on trial, so it must have been iffy whether they could go on to the next grade. A review should be given the first month. The schoolroom is in good condition. The wall in the entry should be repaired. The woodshed needs repairing, and the boys' closet, meaning the outhouse, is in very bad condition. So I don't know if she just didn't get along with some of those boys or if it really was in bad condition. And I love this next line. A box of chalk and erasers are needed and a new broom. And sometimes I wish my life was as simple as all I needed was a new box of chalk. So this is a nice way to look at a teacher's report at the end of the year. This one is another end of the year report. So I think she was staying because there's only the one line. The children are all doing good work. The bell needs repairing and a box of chalk is needed. So I think they must have used a box of chalk a year. At the end of the year, the teacher would give sort of a souvenir card, and this was her picture on the front, and the next slide shows the inside. This souvenir card that I have is actually my grandpa's when he was in school. So Herman Apps is my grandpa, and his sister was Doris. And then my grandpa's dad was on the school board. So this is a neat souvenir for me to have. In Wisconsin, probably the same as what happened in Minnesota. In Wisconsin, at the point in the 50s, lots of schools were closing. Most schools weren't nice enough to have indoor plumbing or electricity like this one does. But a lot of schools were just wearing out, or as was the case of a gentleman I talked to last Saturday, there weren't as many kids living in the country anymore. So sometimes they closed because the enrollment was down, or people thought that was too much repair was needed, or unfortunately they thought they weren't getting a good education compared with the town schools. So it was sort of difficult on communities, and my dad has said that in communities, that the communities actually split apart a bit because some people really wanted the kids to end up going to town, and a lot of people really thought the community school should stay open. So I would imagine it was quite a conflict among families in communities. This is another bulletin that was explaining the problem of one-room schools and what to do about them. In Wisconsin, at one point, there were over 6,000 one-room schools, and they started closing them and selling them off. This one was sold in 1948. And actually, Dustin said that everything from in this school also was sold, right? And then you got some things back. Yeah. That was just.
If we think we got some things back. Yeah, it's pretty iffy.
You have things in here.
We got some stuff. The stuff that was in here was iffy.
But I think it's fairly typical that the land was either given back to the farmer that donated it in the first place, or as it turned out that people just divvied up things. I know my uncle still has the original clock from his one-room school. And you guys are lucky enough to have the bells still, because lots of times they just were gone, disappeared. This is just some dates about Wisconsin's one-room schools. By 1962, all the one-room schools were closed, and school consolidation happened, and kids were bused to town. And this picture reminds me about the patrol belt, because all the one-room schools had patrol belts, and they're supposed to be, blocking traffic for kids to ride home. In the one-room school where my dad's school was, there was no traffic on that corner. But there was always an 8th grader that had the patrol belt anyway, and they were out there, like watching for cars while the kids went home, and then they were the last one to leave the school grounds. And I think it was still an honor to have the patrol belt, even though there was no traffic. This picture's in my book in the front, and this is my grandma, so my dad's mom is the one in the back under the globe. The Chain Lake School ended up closing in 1955, and Faith Jenks was the teacher. She was my great aunt. You can still see one-room schools in wonderful places like this, and I really am impressed that you guys are just showing tremendous support for this building, because it's got a lot of memories for a lot of people. We went to the Wild Rose Pioneer Museum is in town. It was moved into town with some other buildings. And we went in there to visit one day, and this gentleman was giving us a tour of the building. And he came over and pointed to this spot on the wall, and he said, "I think my DNA is here." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I had to put my nose against this spot on the wall so many times that he remembers standing in that corner." And I said, "Well, why were you standing in the corner?" And he said, "Oh, I think I talked too much," which made a lot of sense, because when he was touring Paul and I around, he just talked the whole time. It was pretty fun. He was very proud of his school. Of course, there are other beautiful museums around in Wisconsin, and I'm assuming in Minnesota. This one's in Door County if you get there. Beautiful. The Door County Ephraim one-room school is just gorgeous on the inside. Here's the one again at Old World, Wisconsin, that they moved from the area. And if you go there, they usually have someone who's dressed up as a schoolmaster, so you can pretend you're in school. And there's a different day I was there, there was a lady as a schoolmaster. And at Cassville, in Stonefield Village in Wisconsin, they have a nice one-room school, but it's a little more typical, because it has, like you guys have, the Washington picture and the Lincoln picture and maps and the typical clock and desks. It's a good example. Some one-room schools have been changed into other things. They're still there, but they're other businesses. This one's in Cottage Grove outside of Madison, and it's a coffee shop, so it's called the School Grounds. Sort of clever. This one's in Paoli, Wisconsin, outside of Madison, and it was a two-room school up until the 50s. When they closed and the manager was fixing it up to a restaurant, she took a wall down and there was an original chalkboard behind there. So they kept pieces of it, and that's where she writes the menu of the day for the restaurant and the original chalkboard. And they got a bell for that restaurant, so if you go to eat there, you can ring the school bell. That's fun for families. Here's the inside of the Reed School where I was just last Saturday. In the basement of the Reed School, this is an example of that computer screen, the touch screen I was telling you about, where you can try the 8th grade examination that you had to take to pass out of 8th grade. It was a hard test. This is on the chalkboard inside the Reed School. All that you do with your might. Things done by halves are never done right. All right, so I have a quiz for you to see if you can pass, see if you're paying attention. Oh, this is my slide that I was just talking to a gentleman. He said he wrote a book about his life, right? And I was so excited because I think it's really important for people to start sharing their stories about what it was like when they were young, because things are just changing so quickly. And even what my elementary school experience was like, it's really different for kids today. Things are just changing quickly. And I feel like it's important for people to talk to each other and to think about how things are changing so that those memories aren't lost. So here's my speech about that. So for a quiz, let's see if you guys know these things. And I had to look them up because I'm not from Minnesota, but this is a Minnesota state symbols quiz. And when I do my state symbols quiz in Wisconsin, everybody does pretty well. So we'll see how you guys do. I know.
Pressure.
No pressure. Okay, so raise your hand if you know what the Minnesota state bird is. Yes, ma'am.
The loon?
The loon. Ooh, they're doing good. Okay, you can give yourself a point for that. Okay, how about the Minnesota state drink? That's what it says here. It says milk. I know.
Green?
Okay, how about the fish? Minnesota state fish.
Walleye?
Walleye, right. How about the state flower? Right, you guys are good. How about the state grain? Grain? It makes sense when you hear it. What? No, rice, wild rice. Yeah. And the state sport, hockey. The state tree, and state Norway pine. Yeah, good job. You passed your Minnesota state symbols quiz. Nice job. Is anybody willing to share a story from their one-room school experience? Yes.
I have a question to ask for you.
Oh, perfect.
I noticed from the 1908 school program where they list the different
Yes.
blanks.
The schedule. Yeah.
Did you look at that to compare to your own when you taught school?
I am still teaching school. Yeah.
Did you have a writing class, a reading class, and
Okay.
a math class?
Thank you.
Like that,
Yeah.
Or something different?
That's interesting. Yeah. So it's interesting because it's really not that different. So yeah, except that they've extended the number of minutes, and I'm only teaching supposedly one grade. But anybody who's a teacher knows, like last year in my second grade class, I had kids reading really at a kindergarten level all the way through up fourth grade. So it really is still like a one-room school. So I still do reading groups sort of based on their reading level, and we do have a chunk of time for math and a little bit of time for science and social studies. And thank you, that's a great question.
Did you have different terms for the class, like phonics?
We still teach phonics and spelling and word. I call it word work with the kids.
How about penmanship?
Penmanship's a big hot issue with people.
But you didn't see it on that chart there, didn't it?
Yeah, actually,
Penmanship.
if it wasn't on that chart, I have seen it on report cards where they'll call it handwriting or penmanship. Because a lot of people are saying that we don't need to teach cursive anymore. And I have taught second and third grade, and I know in my school the third grade teachers are still teaching cursive.
I know I had a school tour in here this year, and the school did not use cursive.
Really?
Right.
Yeah.
So what else is different between your program and...
Well, we obviously have added computer labs, and so the kids have, and there's keyboarding skills.
Language? You have language at all?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Not then, yeah, now.
You mean like language arts?
No, just language. There was no language on that schedule, but you have language in your schedule.
Yeah, good point. I don't know if that's necessarily called language arts, but it was called reading or literacy.
You mean like Spanish?
Spanish, no,
Spanish.
Fortnite.
Oh, Spanish. Well, interestingly, a lot of one-room schools, they were generally taught in English. I mean, it was, you were going to school to be American and to learn English. And in lots of one-room schools, some of the kids did not speak English coming to school. So their first years in a one-room school is when they were learning English. And my grandma, my dad's mom, her name was Eleonora. It was very, very German family, and she had been going to a German Lutheran one-room school, but then they moved. So she started school at the Chain Lake School, changed her name and dropped the A, and then she was just Eleanor because they were trying to have her be more American. And so she was just learning, and it was all taught in English.
You don't teach a foreign language in your class?
I don't specifically know. Although in Madison, there's several schools that are dual language in the elementary. Some of the lower grades are taught with Spanish. Yeah, Spanish and English. Yeah. Yeah, or Spanish immersion, yeah. So that's an interesting question to see which things are different. We have, which I assume in one-room schools, it naturally build a community with all those different ages, but now we have like certain standards that are social emotional standards. We're making sure kids are learning empathy and sort of social skills. Yeah, thank you, that's a great question. Yes, sir?
Is that a dunce hat?
A dunce hat. Is that a dunce hat, Dustin?
Yeah, you have to have it. School tour.
I've asked a lot of people about dunce hats, and apparently that was quite a bit earlier.
Yeah.
Sort of like New Englandish and a real Puritan idea. And then Lily said that normally if kids misbehaved in school, And she must have been a really kind, good teacher. She said she would never embarrass a student in front of everybody else, that she would generally take him to the coat room. So I would think if you got taken to the coat room, that would still feel a little embarrassing. But she said she would talk to students away from everybody else and generally keep them after school to finish up work. And she said that was mostly because if you had to stay after school, your brothers and sisters were running home ahead of you and telling on you because they were right there in class with you. So there was no way your family wasn't going to find out. So if you were staying after school and had to finish up your work, you were in trouble with your teacher, and then you got home and you were in trouble for being late, and you were late for chores, and your family already knew something had happened at school because your brothers and sisters told on you and tattled. So you're sort of in double trouble anyway. Yes, sir.
At what point in your research did you discover when principals became part of the education system?
Oh, that's another great question. So the one-room schools, they weren't unsupervised. That's a great question. I didn't talk about that in my talk now, but it's in my book. So that there was a superintendent, a county superintendent system, and then there were the one-room school teachers also were observed, and somebody came out to watch them, kind of like I'm observed now, and then you never knew when they were coming. So that they would show up, and then they would fill out an evaluation, and the one-room school teachers were evaluated. The difference, though, is that the community school board was made up of parents. And those parents helped decide the salary and whether you stayed on or not, if there was a problem. In the treasurer's book, I was looking really closely at teachers' names, and there was a teacher that was getting paid only for part of the year, and then the name changed. So, and I asked my dad about that, and he didn't remember. He said he assumed that the teacher was asked to leave, and they hired somebody in the middle of the year. Yeah.
So principals were always there, they just weren't in the same.
Well, I don't think they were called principals until it was a larger building. And some people have told me that the one-room school was added on to a two-room school, or we were just up in Land O'Lakes earlier this summer. And they had, their Donaldson school had two big rooms with a coat room right down the middle. And then it might have been associated with another school and had a principal over them, but there wasn't a principal in the one-room school building.
Well, the reason I ask is I spent more time in the principal's office than I did in class.
Ah,
It's kind of important that I know these things.
I think
Are they
that,
allowed to be married?
well, thank you. That's another great question. So until a certain time, they were not allowed to be married. And in my book, I have a really funny page that I've read when I do talks with more teachers in the room. I have a whole list of rules of conduct for teachers. And it's pretty funny because you had to dress a certain way and you had to act a certain way and you could not go certain places. And it was a very moral position to be the teacher in the community, and very important and respected. So thank you, that's a great question. Some people have told me they think that it started changing around World War II because there were less adults available and less men available, obviously. That picture of the graduate students from the normal school, all the 4 guys in that picture died in World War II, so they never taught, as it turns out. So I think that as things went on, the teachers were allowed to be married later. But you couldn't always be pregnant in teaching. Like, they didn't want kids to see you pregnant. So some teachers had to be home once they were showing, I think. People have told me different things. I haven't found a consistent rule about it, though. Do you know anything more about it? No? Yes, sir.
Along with that, you were find a male teacher.
Lots of male teachers, yeah. Yeah. There were more women, but there were some men, yes. Yeah. Anybody else have anything they want to share? A story about Christmas or? Yes, sir.
My dad was treasurer of our school in Grant Township. I started school in 1929. So I went through this whole thing to bring up some wonderful things here.
You have anything specific you remember?
Well, I remember we had a potato vacation. I never heard it mentioned. I hated that vacation, but we had a potato vacation every year. We had 800 bushel of potatoes.
Thanks for bringing that up, because I have that in my book. That at the Cheney Lake School they took a potato vacation, and that was because, and it was not a vacation. I read this to my class, and they're like, potato vacation, and it's really because you needed to harvest. So they just closed school for 2 weeks, and the teacher either went home or everybody stayed at home and they were harvesting potatoes for those 2 weeks. So they,
Going to school, they don't talk about going to school. That was the best part of school. We had made rubber ice. We had a horse that took us there every day. We went skiing behind the horse would go home.
you skied behind a horse to school?
Well, on the way to school, she'd take us to school every morning.
Oh, fun.
And there were so many things, like I said, my dad was treasurer 19 years, and he was always tight, and those poor teachers didn't have it. But I congratulate you on all these people that are here, came here to school.
Isn't that great? It's so special that they're actually alumni and they're back today. I love that.
But I would like to tell everybody, ask everybody to write about themselves, because I have 10 children and 35 grandchildren. And I wrote a book of memories for them, the best thing I ever did in my life.
I agree. That's
I
important.
wrote it up to the time I was married, and I was 45. Everything is
I think that's important. And lots of local historical societies are actually collecting memoirs and things like what you've done just so other people can read it. It's really important.
things like here in the War of the Worlds, you don't hear anything.
Yes. That October 31st, the radio show.
We had all of that. And you know, we really got through it pretty fair because we were dumber than hell.
No, you weren't. I just read some of your book. You couldn't have been. You couldn't have been dumb because I just read some of your book. It was good.
I had a computer and an iPhone too.
Yes. Well, and some people feel quite overwhelmed about the idea I'm going to write about my life. So then what I've told them is just start really easy and start with a question like what did you eat for lunch, or who did you sit with at lunch, who are your friends you played with, or what do you remember about recess, or something that will connect with your children and grandchildren so that you have a place to compare and a place to understand how things have changed and what has stayed the same. And when you just start with a memory about a person or a place or something you smelled or something you ate, then I think it really gets the writing started and it gets your memories flowing. And then kids are really good at asking questions. What was it like what did you wear when you went to sleep? Everything, clothes were so different even. It's just really fun to start talking about. Yeah, go ahead.
My wife died of Alzheimer's, and she was being ill for 4, 5, 6 years. You know, I had nothing to do when I was on a computer, so I could even correct myself. I had first book went out, we corrected our second one.
There you go.
The computer, and I read about Jimmy Doolittle the Brave and some of the old.
Nice. That's a great gift for your kids.
It's fun to be able to do, but I think the best way to do it is write a couple pages and then put it away.
Just do a little bit at a time. Yeah. Thank you.
My sister still shocked me when she'll say things like, our mom's college education was paid for by the oldest sibling brother.
Oh.
Yesterday I find this out 70 years later, 80 years later, I find this out. Not that it was that important, but knowing, something. And then we had an aunt that was a teacher at one schoolhouse in northern Colorado.
Yeah, you kind of wish.
It's important.
It is important because once the people aren't here, then it's too late. Like my great aunt Faith, I went to family reunions where she was there, and I never talked to her about what it was like when she was teaching in the Chena Lake School. And then now she's not here, so I wish I could have talked to her specifically about that school. Yeah. Anybody else have anything to share, a question or a memory? No? All right, well, thanks for coming out today, Dustin. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you everyone for coming out again. You can grab some stuff. A couple things is Susan she does have her book up here for sale. She will sign it, and then she'll talk more to anybody who wants to talk to her, I'm sure, and answer more questions while we're kind of getting done. Also, we have a donation box up in the front and the back. Feel free not to trip over them. Maybe with your hand catch yourself, put some money into it. With that, we do these presentations for free every month, so it all helps and goes to getting these continuously done, so we can pack up next year and stuff. So thank you, and feel free to ask questions about the Historical Society and the museum as well. So.